Actually, one thing that Karen just said is just how much that science is telling us what helps develop the child's brain. And we know that just from child development is love. Mm-hmm. We often think of we need to get the child the right thing to eat, or they needed this much playtime or this much social time and this much, but they just need to know that they're loved.
Welcome to Raising Grace Made for Wholeness. I'm really excited that on this episode that Dr. Bill and I are able to have with us Mother Amata Veritas. And I'd actually love for you to introduce yourself, and then you're going to hear a great, common thing between the two of them, except there's a little bit of difference. So I'll let them describe that.
Yes. Very good. Thanks, sister. Thank you for having me. It's going to be a pleasure to be here. My name's Mother Amata Veritas, and I'm the Prioress General of the Dominican Sisters of Mary, Mother of the Eucharist. And I have been for 2 years. It's been a great blessing and a grace in my life. And what Sister is referring to is Dr. Bill and I are both from South Dakota. I am from South Dakota. I shouldn't have said that Dr. Bill is from South Dakota. She is not.
I am from North Dakota.
Yes. So we have the Dakota represented here
very well. Yes.
So that means we're going to have down-to-earth, amazing conversations, just from the heart of America, as we're going through and talking about this wonderful work with what we're working with Raising Grace. And really, I just wanted to express Mother, my gratitude for you, because it's because of your yes and your openness to this that we're able to collaborate and continue this, really to help you, educators in Catholic school, teachers, principals, counselors, and parents in this amazing work that you do to raise children. So in the last episode, Dr. Bill and I took you through the Raised in Grace developmental timeline. Hopefully it sparked your interest to continue to watch this, because there's a lot of content to cover. And like I said, we're going to do this for as long as it takes us to do it. But the subtitle is what we call the Beauty of Gradualness. And this is so important in our time, when everything is kind of sped up and there's so much going on with that, which we'll kind of unpack the reasons behind that a little bit later. But what we want to do in these next few episodes is really to put the theological and the catechetical truths, to lay a foundation, and all that we're trying to do as we approach what we've learned from the neuroscience, what's coming in this rising field of social emotional learning, and really show how this ties in with the virtuous life, which has been around for centuries. The church has the data. We have centuries and centuries of saints who have lived virtue to the heroic degree. And that's really what we desire for the children. So the first place to start is really with the Christian Anthropology. And anthropology is just the study of the origin or the development of the human person. And as we begin this discussion, I invite you, Mother, to really kind of give you a direct teaching on this, because there's so much content. We wanted to make sure that it was clear and concise. So we're going to watch this together so you can have Mother give you a wonderful teaching and understanding Christian anthropology.
What does it mean to be human? In essence, Raised in Grace Made for Wholeness is answering this question in a slow and gradual way. As the psalmist reminds us, 1,000 years in your eyes are merely a day gone by. We are seeking to capture the understanding of the beauty of gradualness and how God continues to knit us together even after our birth. It is a beautiful, gradual process, and it continues throughout our lifetime. When we pause and reflect upon this reality, we are better able to stand in awe and wonder at the marvel of a God who is Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and who has loved us since the foundation of the world. In fact, St. John reminds us that God first loved us. God first loved us. It is from this truth that I would like to reflect upon what it means to be human, a person who lives from the love of this communion of persons. God graciously gives us time to let Him seek us and to patiently wait for us to open our hearts to His love. The first truth is that we are created in God's image and likeness, His image and likeness. Now, what does this look like? We know that the divine image is present in every person that is created, that each person is endowed with a spiritual and immortal soul, and we are the only creature on earth that God has created and willed for its own sake. From the moment of conception, we are destined for eternity and to dwell in the household of God in union with the most holy Trinity. The person is both body and soul. In the story of Genesis, we are taught that God formed man from the dust of the earth and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. The soul gives the life to the body. The immortal soul has two faculties or spiritual powers. First, the intellect, to know him and to reason and to do what is good and avoid what is evil. The second is our will, to freely love him and to choose the good. In the words of St. Irenaeus, man is rational and therefore like God. He is created with free will and is master of his own acts. The second truth is that we are created male and female. God is a pure, uncreated spirit. He is neither male nor female. He created man and woman together and willed each for the other. Genesis tells us again, "It is not good that man should be alone, and I will make a helper fit for him." So what does this tell us? It tells us that God created man and woman equal, that there's a complementarity, a communion of persons, which mirrors the communion of the persons of the Holy Trinity. And this union, this one flesh, enables man and woman to cooperate in a unique way in the Creator's work. God calls man and woman to share in his providence towards other creatures. The third truth is that we are made for communion. It is as if we have the imprint of communion built into us. God, who is Trinity, created us in his image and likeness. The original communion is between the persons of the Trinity. For us, it is the union brought about through the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, the person of love between the Father and the Son, who is given to us in baptism. In fact, God became man so that we could become like him. St. Gregory Nyssa stated that the goal of the virtuous life is to become like God. While this may sound strange to our modern ears, it is true, and it is the means to our holiness and our happiness. This communion is lived out in the unity of the body and the soul, with the heart as the means to uniting us to God, ourselves, and others. The heart is the dwelling place, the place to which I withdraw, the hidden center, beyond the grasp of reason and of others. Only the Spirit of God can fathom the human heart and know it fully. And this brings us back to where we started, with the understanding of God's love and to know and believe that we, as human beings created in his image and likeness, are loved, and it is from this love that we should seek to live. From the love of God who has created and sustained us in love, who has a unique purpose for each one of us, every person matters, and every person matters eternally. For we are the only creatures that God has created for union with him.
Thank you so much. That was awesome.
Thank you, sister.
And what I really loved is how you just gave us three, they say to kind of do things in threes, so you gave us three fundamental truths,
Yes.
To focus on, and that the person is created in the image and likeness of God. We have the immortal soul, the faculties of the soul, which are the intellect and the will, that God created us male and female, and that we're made for communion. So I'd like, really, before we're going to dive into and understand this and have a discussion about the truths, but I think there's one overarching truth that we would love for you all to really understand and to see things, and really, what does it mean to live from God's love, to live from the life of the Trinity? And I think Mother, really, you'd be the first one to really kind of introduce this understanding to our audience. If you do that for us.
Yes. So, and I was thinking about, why did we use that language from instead of for? And when you think about it, Gaudium et Spes says that man was the only creature that God created for himself. He didn't, for his own sake. And if we think of other things that God created, they're for something. They're to be utilized for a reason, for something. But man is not. Man's created for his own sake. And so we have this great opportunity to live from God and from what God gives us, particularly in our baptism, from the divine life, and then we're called to participate in all that God has created. So God made us stewards of the earth. He made us with our intellect and our will, so we can know what is good. We can choose what is good, and we can be participants in creation. So that from gives us, he gives us basically the power and what to live from. And instead of for something, we're not slaves. We're not trying to accomplish something that is like for our own perfection in like kind of a utilitarian way.
Right. Yeah. I just love that, because as when you were speaking, I was thinking, gosh, it really just kind of instills a sense of freedom.
Yes.
Really,
Yes.
And that kind of brings into what the two things that you talked about, the two faculties of the soul. So we know that the soul is what gives life to the body, but the intellect and the will, maybe you could just give a quick little thing to frame what, the understanding of those two faculties.
Yes. So we have our two faculties. We have our intellect, meaning that we can reason about things, we can know things, we can take things in through our senses. As St. Thomas Aquinas says, all our information comes in through our senses, and we can know what is around us. And then we have our will, and our will is our place where we choose like what we're going to choose, what is good for us. Sometimes we're mistaken in what is good for us. And so we may choose something that is sinful, but that's still a free act from my will. So we have this intellect and this will that we've been given by God as these faculties of our soul that make us hopefully trained to live in a further freedom to, again, participate in his divine life, to choose him. To choose the greatest goods.
And you mentioned too that it comes in, through the senses, and then that's when we understanding with the emotions and the passions, which is really something we'll kind of unpack a little bit more when we get a little bit further down the road. But I'm looking at you, Dr. Villa, and I'm sure you're thinking something from the neuroscience perspective, how you want to you could help understand from your lens that you're seeing this. Yes.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I think it's right and good that we place our study and our Raised in Grace program under Christian Anthropology, because children do belong to God, and it's our work to help them encounter him.
Right.
And so that's the first place we want to land. But what you were saying with regard to the intellect and the will, we have something called the neurosequential model, which I think we mentioned during the timeline.
Right.
That this is the order in which the brain develops, and it's the order in which it processes information. So it takes this beauty of gradualness to get to a place where the intellect and will are developed enough to do the will of God. And so when we think about the cardinal virtues and we think about the yes brain fundamentals, we start with balance and resilience, or temperance and fortitude. And those really are emotional bodily experiences that need kind of taming and training over time, so that a child is calm enough and in their still point of grace that they can come into a reflective state and develop their intellect and have that kind of right decision making when it comes to their will. So I think the cardinal virtues kind of build on each other that way, where the first ones are bodily until we get to those higher order reasoning ones, which are basically the cortex.
So the amazing thing when you talk about the beauty of gradualness is that it's taken us all this time to learn this. God knew this from the beginning, because this is all part of his design, right? So, and it's amazing that our intellect, we can kind of understand that and see this cool, see how it kind of all comes together, So that takes man in God's image and likeness, that we're designed for a purpose, which brings us into the second truth about how God created us male and female. And I don't know if you both have some insights or want to talk about that. That again, we go back to what I said at the beginning, that we're called to be saints, right? And that's fully becoming the person God's created us to be. And he has a perfect divine plan for us. So.
Well, in the teaching that God created us male and female is we're created with a body and our soul, and our body is created in a very specific way. And when he creates a human being, either female or male, it is how you participate in the world. So I participate in the world as a female. I take it in as a female. I process it as a female. And my body and my soul are together. And so how I make decisions is based on how I experience the world. And that, again, that's through my body and my soul.
Yeah, and I would bounce off of that and say it's no accident that God creates us male or female. That's not a mistake. And it's part of his plan for us that we are born male or female. And I do think this reflects the diversity of his creation, that there's male and female and that complementarity that you talk about. You know, from an interpersonal neurobiology standpoint, we talk about integration. And integration is the honoring of differences and then finding linkages. And I think this is what God's complementarity is all about, beginning with male and female. And really, coming into your gender is about self-acceptance, that God created me this way and it's part of his plan for me. And that, you know, that's something we have to grieve, that we're this and not that. And that we can't and shouldn't change that, and come into an acceptance and then live out his plan for us.
I love that, what you said about that acceptance and grieving that, because I mean that's also kind of this understanding of like our own self-knowledge or self-awareness, you know, because they're in life. I mean, this is you're talking about the gender, which is a big thing, but also there's little things throughout our life that there's people that are. This is where magnanimity comes in, right? You look at the gifts of the others and you accept those. But there's things that people have other gifts and you don't. And that's an acceptance.
Yes,
it is.
It's just kind of life.
It can't be all things.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Only God can.
Yes.
Exactly. That belongs to him.
Yes.
So when we talk about the Made for Communion, I want to, not that I'm trying, I did say I'm going to be talking about different books and things along the way, but this is a really heavy, beautiful one here, echoing the mystery. But
such a beautiful book.
Yeah,
yes,
it's just this is a great resource where we go through all the different doctrines and give a really clear understanding. And beginning with this divine perspective is what's really what Mother told us at the beginning. This living from God, kind of seeing things through the eyes of God and the lens of God, and looking at this understanding of the Made for Communion. When we understand the Trinity, I want to read this from the divine perspective, where it says, hold on just a second, I'm almost there. So it says, God is a Trinitarian communion of persons whose life is love. He created us to share in this communion of love. And when we understand this of being created in God's image and likeness, and this call for communion, and I don't know if you would like to speak about this, since you have a special love, I know, for the Trinity.
I do.
You know?
Yes.
So I kind of picked that with that in mind, because then you'd be able to unpack this a little bit. So this understanding with the Made for Communion.
Yes. What Sister is referring to is my name. Amata Veritas is Latin for beloved truth. And what my feast day is, so we all have a feast day. And what my feast day is Trinity Sunday. And the reason I chose it, or when we discern, you know, our religious names, the reason I really meditated and chose this is because of this relationship that the Holy Trinity calls us into. That the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit are in relationship all through time, from eternity, and that God is love and God is truth, and that you can't have one without the other. We can't have a God who is just love. We have to have God who is love and truth, that he can never lie to us. He can never deceive us. And then that he loves us. He can't do anything else but love us and holds us in creation as love. But the good news for us is that he calls us into this relationship constantly. He's constantly calling us to experience his love, and he calls us constantly to experience understanding his truth, and that both of these, and living in his love, living in his truth, sets us free. And then the more we experience that freedom and that relationship, the more we want to experience more of his love, more of his truth, As we tie this all into the virtues, this is living the virtuous life.
Oh,
Right.
Yeah, this is
Mm-hmm.
living. We will be happy. We will be holy as we move through our earthly life. The more that we understand our freedom to embrace that love and the truth in the Trinity. So this relationship that he's always constantly calling us into.
Always, and
And not alone, with everybody else.
Exactly.
Yes, with everybody else.
And this is one of the things, when Dr. Villa and I are talking and studying all this, I'm introducing her to theology books, and
Yes.
she's introducing me to neuroscience books. But there's a wonderful book, What Happened to You, and this is this Dr. Bruce Perry, who is the neurosequential model.
Yes,
is really
that the brain develops from regulate to relate to reason, and
Right.
relate is sitting right at the center.
the center of what
Yeah.
it is. And he has this beautiful quote in here where, and if you were to close your eyes and to hear it, you'd be like, that's from a spiritual book. So he says, belonging and being loved are core to the human experience. Trinitarian, right? Okay. I mean, I
Created
don't know
in
if
God's
he's
image.
right. Exactly. We are social species. We are meant to be in community, emotionally, socially, physically interconnected with others. If we look at the fundamental organization and functioning of the human body, including the brain, which he has given this wonderful study, you will see that so much of it is intended to create us, maintain and manage social interactions. We are relational creatures. So again, it's taken centuries for actually, which the Holy Spirit's been telling people, philosophers and theologians, this understanding is that God has revealed himself, but it's like he's trying to really help us to get it,
Yes.
Again.
Yes.
So I don't know if I know that you've introduced me to this. I don't know, Dr. Villa, if you have any part on that you'd like to pull out from what.
Well, it's beautiful that God designed us for a relationship, and that first relationship is to participate in that Trinitarian life. So children are born, they're wired, seeking out relationship, and it's important in our study that we recognize the centrality of that, that the brain is a social organism, that a child needs attachment, they need relationship, they need warmth, care, and love. And this is what organizes the brain. So it's attachment that leads to brain organization, and it's separation, like when we talk about the fall, that leads to central nervous system disorganization. So there's such a beautiful coherence to the whole thing that I really think is so wonderful.
So we talked a couple episodes before, you may remember, you may want to go back, where we talked about the brain being, it's a social organ,
It grows in relationship.
Right.
Yeah.
And then in the very first episode that we did, where in those first 1,000 days, how important that is, and that the understanding of, I don't know if you could maybe say that there may be someone who may not have seen that first.
Oh, sure.
Right.
The first 1,000 days is one of the windows of neurological opportunity that we talk about. But basically, the science is saying, without really saying it, that you've got to love your children. They wouldn't translate it that way, but they're observing that so much of the body and the brain is wired within the context of warm, responsive care, especially in those first 2 years, from conception to 2 years old. And that's what the first 1,000 days is.
So hopefully you have just a real kind of clear understanding of what we mean with the Christian anthropology, and we also have done a video series where our sisters have studied St. Thomas Aquinas's teaching on evolution. It's called Authoring Existence, and that series is available on Openlight Media Plus, which would really take you into a deep dive in that. So as we conclude, I don't know, Mother, if there's like something that you've just kind of stuck out in your mind as you thought about this, or if we had this discussion that you would like to leave with everybody before we...
Actually, one thing that Karen just said that when she was talking at the end here is just how much that science is telling us what helps develop the child's brain. And we know that just from child development is love. We often think of like, we need to get the child the right thing to eat, or they needed this much playtime or this much social time or this much, but they just need to know that they're loved. And we experience this in the classroom all of the time. And I know parents do as well, but just the emphasizing really the importance of a child feeling loved, even from those first couple of days.
Exactly. Yeah. So as teachers, and as parents, I mean, just that day-to-day interaction, with the children. I mean, St. John Bosco talked about that so much, about, just telling the priest and them just to be present to them, and to interact and have that one-on-one correspondence with them, greeting them, greeting the students as they come into the classroom, so that they have that safe, they feel safe, seen, soothed, and secure.
Yes,
You'll get to know those words very well.
Very well. Yes.
And then their learning goes so much better. So we're kind of trying to put the theological virtues in this Christian anthropology back front and center, because when it's practiced and known, the children just grow as God intended them to grow.
So the beauty of gradualness, it's a slow thing. God has gradually revealed himself to us. We gradually begun to understand the beauty of all of this. And so somehow, you wonder if God is kind of like, is up there just saying, okay, you guys are getting really busy and you're not. And now I need to have the science kind of show you this is what your brain, I love you. And this is how you're going to experience this peace and happiness. I think we all know, after COVID, when there was so much of the isolation, I mean, we didn't really experience that as much in community because we were all together, and I know many families, I know you've expressed this too, that it was a very special time for you,
it was
to be together with your family.
I did enjoy that. But children
lot.
Themselves were quite isolated, and they need to be in community with, different kinds of adults in their lives, and teachers play a huge role in that.
So remember, you are created in God's image and likeness. We all have an immortal soul with the two faculties of the soul, which are the intellect and the will. God created us male and female for a purpose, to become a saint, to become the person God has created us to be.
That's right.
And we're made for communion, this beautiful communion of love, to be drawn into the life of Trinity. And as Mother's name says, want to tell us the meaning of your name again?
Beloved truth.
Beloved truth. Remember that. So pray for Mother Amata Veritas. Think of beloved truth. And God bless you all.